Once upon a time on our very own Earth, there was a huge fight that went on for hundreds of years. Imagine two teams. On one side, we had people just like us, and on the other side were vampires, creatures of the night, who are super strong and super fast, but don't like the sun at all. This fight made the Earth a pretty sad place to live, and people had to come up with a big plan to survive. So people built giant walls around their cities to keep the vampires out and trained superhero-like fighters called priests. These priests were super brave and really good at fighting vampires. After a long time, the humans finally got the upper hand. Most vampires were defeated, and the few left were put in special areas where they couldn't hurt anyone. When the fighting stopped, the big bosses of the cities, known as the church, said, "Thanks, but we don't need you priests anymore." So these superhero fighters had to try and live like normal people again, which was really hard for them. Meanwhile, some adventurous folks decided to live outside the big walls, away from the church's strict rules. Now let's talk about one particular priest who was living quietly in the city. One day, he got a visit from Hick, a kind of police officer from a place called Augustine, which was free from the church's control. Hick had some really bad news. The priest's brother and his wife were gone because of a vampire attack, and his niece Lucy was taken by these scary night creatures. Hick also had a crush on Lucy, so he really wanted to save her. The priest thought, "I need to do something," and went to ask the church to let him be a priest again so he could save Lucy. But the big boss, Monsignor Aurelius, didn't believe him and said no. The priest was not going to take no for an answer, so he left the city to save Lucy himself. But the church was worried about him leaving and sent 3 priests and a priestess to bring him back. The priest and his brave friend Hick setting off on an exciting adventure to a place called Nightshade Reservation. This place is a bit spooky because it's where humans, who have caught a weird sickness that makes them listen to vampires, live with their vampire bosses. It's like if you had a remote control that worked on people instead of TVs, and the vampires had the remote. After a bit of a tussle there, they find out a big secret. Most of the vampires are hiding out in a place called the Vampire Hive of Solamira. People thought this place was empty after the big war, but they were wrong. It's like finding out there's a whole city of ants living under a rock in your backyard. Then they meet an old friend, the Priestess, who decides to join them. She and the priest had fought side by side a long time ago, and she feels more loyalty to him than to the big bosses of the church. There's a sad story here, too. The last time they fought in Solamira, the priest couldn't save one of his friends, and that memory is like a heavy backpack of sadness he carries around. Together, they fight a big, scary vampire guardian and find out that the vampires are planning something very sneaky. They've made a new army and dug a secret tunnel all the way to a town called Jericho. It's like the vampires are planning a surprise party, but instead of cake and balloons, they're bringing danger. Just as the sun sets, making it a perfect time for vampires to party, 3 other priests, sent by the boss of the church, arrive in Jericho. And guess what? A train rolls into town, not with passengers, but with vampires ready to cause trouble. They're led by a very bad guy wearing a black hat. Imagine the scariest cowboy you can, but instead of roping cattle, he's in charge of vampires. When the bad guy in the black hat offers the 3 priests a chance to join his vampire gang, they say, "No way!" But unfortunately, saying no to a villain like this doesn't end well, and he doesn't play fair. He takes them out of the picture, leaving our heroes with an even bigger challenge ahead. The next day, our heroes, the priest, the priestess, and Hick, find themselves in Jericho, a town that's way too quiet. What they see next is super scary. 3 good guys who were supposed to protect the town are now in big trouble. The bad vampires have been sneaking around on trains, hitting towns when they least expect it. And now they're planning something really big and really bad for the cities behind the giant walls. Hick is really worried. He thinks the cities are safe during the day because of the sunlight, but the priest has some bad news. The cities are covered in smoke and ash, making them dark enough for vampires to have a field day, or rather, a field night. If the vampires' train gets into a city, it's going to be a disaster. Things get tense when Hick worries that Lucy, the girl they're trying to save, might have been turned into one of the vampires. That's when a bombshell drops. Priestess tells everyone that Lucy is actually the priest's daughter. It turns out Priest and Lucy's mom were close, but when the priest had to leave, another man stepped in to help. Lucy never knew her real dad's story. With no time to waste, Priestess has a plan to stop the train by blowing up the tracks, while Priest and Hick sneak onto the train to save Lucy. They fight hard against vampires and their human helpers. But then they face the biggest shocker, Black Hat, the super bad guy leading the vampires. Used to be a good guy like them. but he was captured and turned into a half-vampire, half-human creature by the Vampire Queen. Now he doesn't have to hide from the sun anymore. Up ahead on the train tracks, Priestess is doing her own hero stuff. She's trying to stop the train filled with vampires by blowing up the tracks. But things go sideways when one of the bad guys ruins her plan by breaking her bomb remote. So, she does something super brave. She puts the explosives on her motorcycle, drives it straight at the train, and leaps off just in the nick of time. Boom! The train goes off the rails, taking out a bunch of vampires and Black Hat, the big bad guy. Then, our group of heroes, including Priestess, Hicks, and Lucy, make a great escape. They're safe for now, but there's still a lot to deal with. Back in the city, Priest has a face-to-face with Aurelius, the big church leader, in the middle of a church service. He's there to tell everyone about the vampire train they stopped and to show proof. He throws a vampire head right in the middle of everything, shocking everyone there. You can imagine their faces, like when someone surprises you with a loud boo. But Aurelius, he's stubborn. He doesn't want to listen and keeps saying the war with the vampires is over, like someone covering their ears and singing to avoid hearing the truth. Outside, Priest and Priestess have a quiet moment. Priestess tells Priest that other good guys, just like them, are on their way to join them. It's a bit like when you're picking teams for a game, and you find out some really good players.